everybody. Thank you for joining us today. Welcome to Build with Glide.
There we go.
I'm your host, Andy Claremont, the head of community here at Glide. Welcome to Build with Glide. This is a series where we go under the hood on existing Glide apps or build new apps from scratch. And today I'm really excited to have Marco Balpato here from Low Code, who's kicking off our three-part series on Build with Glide plus AI. So we're going to be doing these back to back over the next few weeks, talking about how to use Glide with AI. And we're starting off with this session on the basics of OpenAI. Now, before we get into that, Marco, I would love to just learn a little bit more about you and what you're doing over at Low Code.
Sure.
So to kick things off, tell me about yourself. What are you up to with Low Code?
So Low Code is something I started a couple of months ago, and it's really started to gain steam at the moment. It's essentially got two parts. So there's Low Code School, and this is where I help essentially, budding low code developers level up their Glide skills and make a living as a Glide developer. And that's a totally free community, and everyone's helping each other level up. It's really supportive and really cool. And then on the other side, I have the Glide app development. So a client will approach me with a job that they want. They want to build a certain app. We chat back and forth, and I'll essentially build that out in 3 to 5 weeks. And what I love about this setup is that it's a really symbiotic setup. So I'm working with clients, I'm keeping my skills sharp, and I'm getting really valuable insights from these clients and then passing it on to the people in the school and vice versa. So we have some amazing people in Low Code School that are doing tutorials, they're coming up with great ideas, they're solving problems, and this actually helps me develop better apps for my clients. So we have this like mutually beneficial kind of symbiotic relationship where both parts of Low Code are feeding each other with value. So that's Low Code. That's how it's set up at the moment.
That's amazing. And I love that what we're doing with this session is it feels like a little bit of a teaser for some of the magic that you're bringing to life through Low Code School. Is that a fair?
Yeah.
Awesome. And I see some folks in the comments here. It looks like we got some Low Code members in the chat.
Yes.
Hi, everybody.
Low Code Army.
Hey, Low Code Army. So Marco, what brought you to Glide in the first place? How did you discover Glide?
So I discovered Glide quite a few years ago, actually. I was working, I don't know whoever's seen the video that we put out, but I was working in the wine industry in Hong Kong. And Hong Kong is very pen and paper. A lot of their business is still pen and paper. And when we started the wine business, it was pen and paper as well. And so what I wanted to do was I started looking at ways to take us from, spreadsheets and sticky notes and stuff to apps and automations. And that led me to, researching different no-code tools. And I stumbled across Glide. And I think the first app I ever built on Glide was a wine review app that I could use to create social media posts. So, I would I would do a review of the wine. I'd take a photo and then, talk about the acidity of it, the flavors, the body, etc. And then it would generate this, I think it was just a template column at the time. It would generate this review that I could copy and paste into social media. And not only that, I think I also had an integration with Banner Bear where it actually created the image itself. And then I was like, wow, this is like saving me so much time. I don't even have to format the image, do anything. And then from there, it just spiraled.
That's awesome. And with where you started then and now, what's the biggest thing you've learned in that time? Like your biggest takeaway from the Glide experience so far?
I would say that if you're creative enough, you can build anything in Glide, because there are a lot of problems that all it requires is just some creative thought, maybe some collaboration with people. But there is always a way to get a certain function up and running, or solve some sort of problem, whether it's internally in the business that you need to automate something or streamline something. There's always a way to do it in Glide, which gets kind of addictive, because then you're just walking around always thinking, I could build that in Glide. I could build that in Glide. And yeah, it's a lot of fun.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm feeling that for myself as well. The just going around and being like, hey, this process could be so much easier if there was a Glide
100%.
app for it. This company, this thing could use a Glide app to make it better.
Yeah.
So let's hop over to what everyone's here for. Let's talk about what we're going to be building today. So you were talking a bit about wine. I know
Mhm.
wine's a big deal for you. What's our scenario for our session
Okay.
today?
So the scenario is basically as follows, right? When we were working in Hong Kong, we had a lot of data in our database. We had wines, purchase orders, sales orders, stock with different warehouses, all of these different data points that we needed to go out and present properly. We needed to gain good insights to go out and present properly. So if we were going to a tasting with a certain restaurant, we would need to know that, okay, they tasted these wines last time. They like this. Let's bring them something fresh. Okay, it's a seafood restaurant. Maybe we should focus more on whites and this and that. And we would just be hounding our assistant with questions, because we'd be out and about and we didn't have time to like look up the actual data. So we'd be out and about, and we'd just, because we're on the go, we'd record a voice message and say, hey, so-and-so, can you please tell me when the last time they bought this was, or which wines they enjoyed the most from the last tasting, and this and that. So it really got me thinking, I would love to just be able to talk to the app directly. I don't want to take my assistant away from what she's focusing on to just answer a silly question that theoretically I could look up if I had the time. So this kind of became the idea. And so what we're going to build today is essentially the talk to your inventory app side of things. So I've got an app that I've kind of pre-configured just with data. Otherwise, it would take 3 hours on stream. So we just got data in the back end. There's nothing on the layout screen. And what we're going to do is set up. We'll do a little preview of some AI infusions I've done in the back end, and then we'll just build out the ability to talk to your own inventory app. And it doesn't have to just be inventory. It could be anything. You could be asking questions about your coaching app or your operating system that you've got running the business. It's just a really powerful way of giving AI the data it needs to give you a good answer, basically.
Nice. And so what I love about this is that we have a process that you're already following, and now we're bringing in Glide for part of that,
Yeah.
and then making it even better by pulling in the OpenAI integration.
Yeah.
Awesome.
100%.
Marco, I'm going to hand the controls over to you. Let's get building.
All right. So we'll jump in, and let me know if you can see the screen. Hopefully
We're all good.
All right. Okay, beautiful. So the first thing I want to do is just show people how to actually set up OpenAI in their Glide app. So all you need to do is head to settings, head to integrations. And in this list here on the right-hand side, you'll see OpenAI. Once you've added it to your app, you'll be prompted to insert an API key. And all you need to do for this API key is create an account on OpenAI. You will need to submit some sort of credit card details, I believe, because I don't think the API is free. But essentially, you just create a new secret key, copy that key that it generates, and keep it somewhere safe, because once you've copied it and closed it, you can't find it again. And then you just come back and paste it here, and OpenAI Glide will do its thing, and then essentially you've basically got a Glide app that is ready to use all of OpenAI's incredible integrations. So that's how you set it up. Hopefully that's clear. What I'm going to do now is just jump onto the back end and show you some of the power that you can extract from Glide with AI. So we have a fairly complex inventory app. It has wineries, wines, order items, warehouse items, purchase orders with shipments. You can mark the shipment as received or not. This will change the stock throughout the whole app. It's really quite a complex and data heavy app, even though there's only a little bit of data in here now. It's set up to handle quite a lot. And this is one of the things I love about Glide is the fact they're shipping, for example, big tables, and they're focusing on power, because initially this is one of my concerns. Can Glide handle something with, 100,000 rows, 200,000 rows? And they've kind of squashed that concern, which is awesome. So what I want to do is just show you a use case of AI on the back end. So with a wine can have one varietal, it can have many varietals. And it's important to understand the varietals that are in the wine to then also create a description for that wine, because the varietals can influence the flavor of the wine quite a bit. And if we want to create a tasty description, we want the description of the varietals. So if you can see here, I have a set of related varietals, and this is just a relation column that is looking up in my varietals table any varietal that has this wine's ID. And I'm saying you can match multiple, because it can have multiple varietals in a single wine. And it's pulling in these descriptions here. But these descriptions are generated by AI. So let's jump into that table, and I'll show you how I've created these descriptions for the varietals. So in the AI column here, all I've done is added a template column, and I've essentially said to this Glide column to create a template basically that I can use as the prompt for my AI column. So here I'm just saying, describe the grape, and the word grape is going to be replaced by the name of the actual grape. So describe the grape varietal, talk about its origin, flavor profile, and any other interesting facts. So you can see here, this has got the Nerello Mascalese grape. This is Nerello Cappuccio. This is Cannonau. And I'll stop there before I can't pronounce the rest of the grapes. But we've created this template column here. And then we have a description column. And this description column is the first kind of infusion of AI that I'm going to be showing. So this column here is sending a message to ChatGPT. But I'll just quickly show you how you get to this column. So if we come here, all you need to do, once you've set up that OpenAI integration in the beginning, you select type, you head to integrations, OpenAI, and then it's going to be this one here. So you're sending a message to ChatGPT. Now, theoretically, you could use the complete prompt. These two in this particular use case are essentially the same. For some reason, I prefer the ChatGPT answers. They just seem a little bit more, less robotic, I guess, more human. And so I've used send message to ChatGPT, and we don't need history for this particular thing.
I think there's a good call out there. Sorry, for other folks who may have not played with the integration before, and the difference between the OpenAI API calls and the ChatGPT comes with some additional context and conditioning. When you're interacting with ChatGPT, you're going to have a bit of a different response than if you're going directly to complete prompt, because they're going to two different APIs.
Yes, yeah. And the ChatGPT integration has also the latest version, ChatGPT 4, which is a bit more advanced. So it can usually give you a better result. So all we've done there is we've created a piece of dynamic text. It's just a string of text that is inserting the grape varietal. And here we are sending a message to ChatGPT. Now, in the prompt, we're just telling ChatGPT what it is. In this case, I've called it Wine GPT. You're an AI wine assistant. Your responses are no longer than 3 sentences. If you don't know what the answer is, put TBD, etc. So this is how you kind of tell AI what it is and what its function is going to be. And then the message is just pulling in the prompt that we just created, right? So it's pulling in that dynamic string of text, So every response is going to be specific to the grape varietal. And in this case, we're just using GPT 3.5 Turbo. This is quite a fast, compared to GPT-4, it's quite a fast model from ChatGPT. We've set the temperature low because for this particular thing, we don't want it getting too creative. We want it to kind of stick to what we've asked it to do. And we don't need much length for this one. We just need 200 characters, and we've set the frequency to 0.8. So that's all that's doing. And you can see here, we're asking it to describe the Nerello Mascalese grape. And you can see that it's created a nice little description of this grape. So Nerello Mascalese is a red grape varietal primarily grown in Sicily, etc. It talks about the cherries, the herbs, the berries. And this is a great little snippet of information that we can use to essentially do the same process in the wines, but with additional information. So we've got the grape varietal descriptions. Let's jump into the wine column, the wine table. And these descriptions are being pulled in. We've got the related column here. And all we're doing with this is just saying, create a list of all the varietals descriptions. And this is just a joined list, right? So we're separating by comma. And so if there's more than one varietal in this wine, it'll pull in 2 descriptions. If there's 3 varietals, it'll pull in the 3 descriptions. And so we're just creating a string of text that is describing the grapes that are in this wine. Now, the reason this is important is because when we're creating the description for the wine, we're doing the same formula, creating a prompt using a template column, getting a description using the ChatGPT column. So we jump in here. And in this case, we're saying, the template is saying, write a very short review of the wine. So in this case, the word wine is going to be replaced by the name of the wine. From region, again, this is going to replace with the actual region of the wine. And talk about its appearance, aromas, flavors, body, tannins, acidity, suggested food pairings, etc. Now, the food pairings is important because when we're asking our inventory system questions, we want to give the AI as much information as possible so it can give us the best answer. And in this case, we want to make sure that the response has things like best food pairings and stuff like that, because if we're heading to a seafood restaurant, we want it to use that information to suggest the best wine. And the last thing in this template column is we're just pulling in that description that we created in the other table. So we're saying, here's some additional information about the varietals in this wine, and we're replacing the 2 words varietal descriptions with that list of descriptions that we've created. So it seems a little bit complex, but it's actually fairly simple. We've got this information, we're pulling it into a template column, and then we're using that template as the prompt for the AI column. So we'll close this, we'll jump into here. And again, same formula as the varietals. Here we're telling it that it's the best wine sommelier in the world, and it's famous for describing wines in a way that makes the reader salivate. So you can get as creative or as straightforward as you want, but we're doing the same thing, pulling in the description from that template column, the prompts from that template column. And in this case, we're using ChatGPT 4. So it's going to be a little bit, spicier. And we're raising the temperature, so it just has a little bit more creativity with the description. And you can see here that it creates some pretty fantastic descriptions. It's probably a bit hard to read, but I can assure you that it's quite accurate, and the food pairings and stuff that it generates is really good. So you can use this for any business. It doesn't have to be wine. You can describe candles. You can describe the smell of a candle. You can describe whatever it is. It doesn't have to be products either. It can be services that you're describing. You could give it some criteria for the service, and it could create a beautiful description of the service for you. So this is a little preview of what you can do. But what I want to do now is jump into the actual building of that talk to your app side of things. So this is one way of doing it. This is the way I've done it for this tutorial. But something else you'll learn with Glide is that there's always a different way to do it and probably a better way to do it. So this is why it's always great to be part of, for example, Glide's forum or something like Low Code School, where you can bounce ideas or bounce concepts off people and just poke holes at it, right? See how it could be done better. And it's going to help you build better apps and also build better apps for clients and stuff like that. So let's begin building. All we need to do, it's actually simpler than you think to get this sort of awesome integration up and running. All we need to do is add 4 columns to our user table. And we're going to add question / and what this is going to do, it's going to group everything into a folder, basically. So the first column is going to be the table. It's just a text column. And essentially, this is going to be, it's going to inject either wines or orders or whatever table we want to ask a question about. That piece of information from the front end will be inserted here. And we can duplicate this. And we're just going to create an audio column. Now, when we're recording the voice messages, the audio needs its own column where the file is going to be saved. So this is just going to be a URL column. And this is the first little AI aspect of this talk to your app side in the next column. So what we're going to do is add a column from OpenAI called speech to text. And what this is going to do is whatever the audio file is, it's going to transcribe it into a string of text. So here we just want to select that audio column that we've just created. And we're going to call this transcription. And we've got one more column. That's basically it. We have got a question / so we've got a text column that's going to tell us which table we want to ask a question about. We've got an audio column where our voice recording is going to be stored. We've got a transcription column that's going to just transcribe that audio we've just recorded. And then we've got an answer column. And this is going to be filled by an action that we're going to build on the front end. But we'll get to that in a minute. The next thing we want to do is add a new Glide table. And this is a very simple table called questions. In this case, we're going to keep it very basic. We're just going to say, this is the question column, and it's just a text field. And this is the answer column, and it's just a text field. Now, this is where the question and answers that the people using our app are going to be stored. In this case, I've kept it very simple, but you can add other information. You can enrich this with information like who submitted this question, when was it submitted, when was the answer provided, stuff like that. And you can actually create all of that very, very easily. But what we're going to do is just keep it very basic. And we don't need this empty row. And for the back end, believe it or not, that's all you need to do. It's a total of 6 columns, and you've just given your app the ability you've just given it the ability to ask it questions. So we'll jump onto the front end, and the front end is only slightly more complex than that. It's very, very simple. So the first thing we want to do is add a set of buttons. And these buttons are going to basically specify which table we want to ask a question about. So we go here, and we're going to click button block. And it's already set it up with two buttons. In the first one, we're going to say ask about wines. And we're going to look up a nice fancy little wine bottle. And actually what I like to do is use tiles in this case, because you can see the icon and the text in full. And what this is going to do is set some column values. So we're currently on the user table. Let me just show that actually. So if we go back here, we're just on the users table. You can also just specify it through the user profile. But we're going to set some columns in this person's user row. The table is going to be wines because we're clicking the Ask About Wines button. And we're going to clear any audio file that might be there existing. And we're going to clear also any answer that might be sitting there. So that's how we set up that. And then we just do the exact same for the orders. We're going to find a nice little cart. That's this little money cart. And we're going to do the same process. Set column values. This time, however, we're going to be asking a question about the orders table. And we're going to clear any value from the audio column and clear any value from the answers column. So there's one more thing we need to do with these buttons, and that is set some visibility rules, because once they've selected which table they want to ask a question about, we want to hide these buttons temporarily because they've done that part of the process, and we want to show a bit of progression so they're advancing through the process. So we're going to set some visibility rules. The first one is that we're going to make sure that the audio is not empty, or the answer is not empty, or the table is empty. So we've got three basically conditional visibility rules that we're going to use. And it might not make sense now, but it will once we're going through the process. So this is just basically telling it when it shouldn't show, basically. So buttons are done. Let's move on to the next, which is the audio recorder component. Now, all we need to do for this is specify where we want to save it to. And in this case, it's that audio column that we created. The title, we want it to be Ask a Question, if I can spell it correctly. Ask a question. And in this case, the action that it's going to perform is going to be a custom action. Now, we'll come back and configure this after, but I'm just going to set it up now. Hopefully we don't forget before I try and do the demo to set that up, but I'll do that at the end because that's slightly more complex. So just like the buttons, we're going to add some conditional visibility, right? Because we want to make sure before this is showing that they've selected which table they want to ask a question about. Now, theoretically, you could get fancy and ask AI to determine itself which table it thinks you're asking a question about. I'm not going to try that on this stream because AI can be temperamental if you're just trying to do something live. But basically, we're going to say, okay, which table do you want to ask a question about? And then this will show once we know. So let's jump in there. And in this case, we want to show it when the table is not empty and the audio is empty and the answer is empty. So it's going to show once we've selected a table, but if there's any audio or anything, it's going to hide. So you can just see now, I'll just click this and there you go. So now it's showing. So we'll jump back and just remove that. So we've got this. And then there's only two more components. We have a little hint component, and we're just going to say analyzing your data. And we can add a little magnifying glass to this. And this is just to let people know that although there's nothing changing or loading or happening on screen, that there is a process going on in the background. Because a lot of the time, if there's any sort of delay between, prompt an answer and you're not letting them know that it's being processed, they might think an error has occurred. So in this case, we're just going to make it a little yellow, or it doesn't really matter. You can make it neutral. And this is also going to have some visibility rules. So we want to show this when the audio is not empty, but the answer is empty. So this means once we've submitted a question and it's got the recording, when the recording is there but the answer isn't, we're going to let people know that we're kind of processing and it's all happening. And then the final component is just a list of the questions, basically the questions and answers. So we add a list component. The source is going to be that questions table that we've created. We're going to have the title as the question. The description is going to be the answer. And we don't need an image in this case. For this general options part, that's all we need to do. We don't really need the search bar in this case. We could, but for this example, we'll leave it off. And what we want to do is sort by the sheet order in reverse. So this means that the latest questions will appear at the top, and then it will continually push down with basically the latest options. So we've got this, and then there's a few other things. We don't want people to be able to add items to this table. We don't want them to edit it. And if we jump into the advanced, we don't really want to show a detail screen for this because it's just a piece of text. There's no action that we need to do. But what I will do is just configure a little delete button. And this is going to simply delete the row. Now, the way I've set it up is basically that it will show the questions and answers from everyone, and everyone will be able to view it. If you wanted to make it more private, you could set up, for example, roles and use column table owners or row owners. But in this case, we're just going to keep it open. Everyone can see everyone's questions and that sort of thing. So in terms of setting up the front end, I believe that this is correct. Now, what we need to do is set up the action that we kind of hinted at before. So let's go here. Now, the first thing we want to do is set some if-else rules, right? So if the table that the person selected is wines, and this is what is inputted when they click that button. If the table is wines, do this certain thing. Else, and for this example, because there's only two, we could actually leave it as that. But in this case, we can say else if the table is orders, do this. So based on what they're clicking, it'll ask different tables when they click when the recording is finished. So we don't want to show a notification. What we want to do, the first thing we want to do is wait for a condition. And we want to wait. I'm just going to put 10 seconds. And here, we're going to say, I'm going to let the person know that it's generating the transcription. So this is once the recording has been added, it's going to take a little bit of time for OpenAI to transcribe that audio. It's very quick, but it's good to let people know. And it's actually essential because we need that transcription before we ask a question about the table, because the transcription is the question. So we want to wait until the transcription is not empty. So when they finish recording, it's going to wait until the transcription is ready. And then it's going to move on to the next, basically, action, which is an OpenAI answer a question about a table action. So once we've got the transcription, then we can move on to this. Now the question is going to be the transcription. This is why it's essential that we wait until it's there before moving on to this step. In this case, because we've selected wines, the table we're going to ask a question about is going to be the wines table. And if you're using this particular action, you always want to configure the columns that you want to send basically to OpenAI. So we're going to select some columns here. And you can see here that it's left some out and it's included some. Now, we don't really need OpenAI to analyze the row ID. That's not really going to provide us with any valuable answers. So we can uncheck that. And since these names are like in folders and stuff like that, we want to give OpenAI a little bit more context so it can give us a better answer. So we're going to rename this column to wine name, even though it's basically the same. This is going to be wine vintage. Now, if we were asking a question about food pairings and stuff like that, and we didn't select this description column, it would have to use its own knowledge of wines to provide us an answer. This is why it's important that we check this column, not the prompt, but the actual description that AI created earlier. And we call this the wine description. We don't need the winery's ID either, but we do want the winery name. We want the region name. We don't want the type ID. We want the type name. So this is going to be red wine, white wine, sparkling, etc. So we can call this wine type. We are going to be asking questions about stock. We definitely want that. And we definitely want to know what our buy price is, because if we're negotiating prices, for example, we want to know how much we purchased it for to know how much of a discount we can give before we start chewing into our own profit. And this one is going to be the wholesale price. So as far as I'm concerned, that's all we need. So we've selected the perfect columns. We don't need a row specifier because we want it to decide which row is the most relevant. But we do want to provide a little bit of additional context. And this is where you can refine the answer that OpenAI is going to give. And for here, I'm just going to copy and paste something I had earlier, which is basically saying it's telling OpenAI to analyze every row carefully before answering. Make your answer clear and conversational in tone, and then just simplify any numbers or dates. There's just a few more things we're going to do. We're going to set the temperature quite low. If we're asking a direct question, we don't want it to get creative and pull something out of a hat. We just want a pretty deterministic answer. The max length, we can make 200, and then 0.8 seems to be the magic number for frequency. The last thing we're going to do is specify, okay, it's going to analyze this table, give us an answer. Where do we want that answer to sit? And it's just going to sit in that answer column that we created in the users table. So that's that setup. And then there's only two more things. We're going to, now this one isn't strictly necessary, but I'm putting this in because it'll avoid any possible errors. And all we're going to do is basically wait until we have an answer before moving on to the next step. And so we can wait 10 seconds and we can say, analyzing your data. Now, once this completes, there will be an answer, but this is just kind of like a safety measure to make sure that before we try and add a column to the questions table, we have an answer. And that leads us to the last action, which is adding a row to that questions table we created. Now, the question is going to be our transcription, and the answer is going to be the answer. Now, we don't have to do it now, but you would essentially duplicate this underneath the orders section. And all you would do is change this from wines to the orders table. Now, as far as I'm concerned, unless I've missed it in my 3 a.m. kind of haze, I think it should be working correctly. So we can actually ask a question, and hopefully this works. So we want to ask a question about wines. We click this, and then we can record our question. I'm heading to a seafood restaurant. Which wine would be the best wine to recommend to this restaurant? Now, if you're asking it more complex questions, it's going to take a while to actually analyze and come up with an answer. So it might take a few seconds. It's still much quicker than trying to message your assistant. But hopefully, this is going to give us an answer. And it's going to inject it. And there we go, which is beautiful. So it's recommended the Pietrodolce Etna Bianco. So this is I can confirm that this is a delicious wine from Sicily. It is perfect with seafood. And here it's talking about, how the tasting notes are going to pair beautifully with the seafood and that sort of thing. So this is fantastic. Now we can ask it some additional questions. We obviously don't want to recommend a wine that's out of stock. So let's ask it a question about that. Great. And how many bottles of the Etna Bianco do we have in stock? So again, it's going to analyze, and this is a bit of a simpler question, so it should pop up a little bit quicker. And you can see that it's got 304 bottles in stock. Now, just to show you that this is actually working correctly, if we go to the wines and we look at the Etna Bianco here, we can see it's got 304 bottles. So that's amazing. And then in the description, it's probably going to talk somewhere about seafood. There we go. So it's good with seafood or pasta dishes. And so this is why, if you build out your own version of this, it becomes an incredibly powerful tool to basically interact with your own database, your own data. So that's how you build it, basically. That's the extent of the whole the build out.
That's fantastic. I want to give a little applause here because I think this is such a perfect encapsulation of how Glide works with OpenAI.
Yeah.
So if I had to recap in kind of 3 points, first, we're using OpenAI to enhance the data that we already have. We have these key data points, in this case about the wine in your inventory, to give more color and more context, more information about that inventory.
Yeah.
And then
Absolutely.
as we're building out the interface and we add the actions, we're using OpenAI again to interact with all that data that we've just created. So it's coming into these 2 separate phases here that create the whole experience that seems, when you run it, very seamless and absolutely magical.
Yeah, that's the perfect word to describe it. It feels like magic, especially when you know the alternative. I know how clunky it is to, constantly hassle my assistant to just give me basic pieces of information. And so this is really, it's a brilliant way of pulling your app into 2023. It's super powerful.
Now we have a couple of questions here, and they're starting to come in a little bit faster now. First off, just this is fairly general, but when it comes to using OpenAI, we saw when you were adding the actions, every call to OpenAI is an update in Glide.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's also cost considerations on the OpenAI side because you're using OpenAI resources, of course.
Yes.
So what should users be aware of as they're building out apps and interacting with OpenAI? Do you have any general advice on things that they should keep in mind?
Yeah, certainly. So the first thing I would say is stick to, if you're concerned about costs, stick to GPT 3.5 Turbo instead of GPT-4. GPT-4, if you're using that, is exponentially more expensive than GPT 3.5. It's still, in my opinion, and in this case, it would still be worth the cost, even if it's costing $50 to $100 a month, whatever it is. It would still be worth the cost. But if you're concerned about it, you can use, instead of GPT-4, you can use GPT 3.5 Turbo or something like that, and that's going to considerably reduce your costs. And then I guess in terms of updates on Glide side, you just have to be aware that there's always going to be limitations. And if I feel like if the app is bringing you a tremendous amount of value, then you're not going to be too concerned about that. People are always concerned with the subscription fees and this and that. And I totally get it, because they start piling up. But if the app is really streamlining your operations or allowing your salesmen to close more deals and get more sales and stuff like that, I guess you just have to weigh it up on that front.
Now, we had another question here about the size of data that you can send over to OpenAI. And I know there is a limit. You hit a certain threshold, and you just can't load in everything into a prompt and say, take this whole data table. What's your experience been when it comes to finding that line of how much you're sending over?
Yeah, to be fair, I actually haven't pushed it to its limits. That's one of the things I was thinking about when jumping on this stream. Is I do wonder how much, in terms of like a table. Obviously, if there's 100,000 rows, and you're asking ChatGPT or OpenAI to answer a question about that, you're going to run into some limitations, because even ChatGPT has its own limitations of 25,000 characters, I believe it is, or something like that. And so what I would say is that perhaps you could refine the way you're asking the question, right? So if you have, let's say, 1,000 wines, but you're going to ask a question about only white wines from Sicily, you could do the same thing we did in terms of asking about wines and orders. You could kind of figure out some way, like I said, anything's possible in Glide. So you could probably filter it to just white wines from Sicily and then ask a question about them. So I don't have the best answer. I don't actually know what the limit is, but already I'm thinking, okay, if you can only send a certain amount, let's filter them down somehow and ask a question about that specific set.
I think that's a great piece of advice, and just philosophy in general when it comes to building apps in Glide, where, and you mentioned it during the build, there are many different ways that you can solve a problem using Glide. And sometimes the easiest or immediate solution that might come to mind, it may not be the most efficient. But one of the nice things is that as you are figuring out, what's the most efficient way to potentially build a solution, often there's a benefit of that. On if it's a simpler solution, it's less complex to compute, you're using less resources, and it's often faster for the user. So if you can find a more efficient way of doing something, you're going to see ripple effects in terms of benefits because of that.
Yeah, definitely. So it's a balance. It's a balancing act. And what you'll find is that the more apps you build, you'll think back to old projects and go, why did I do it that way? I could have, done it this way. And it's just the nature of building apps, and that's part of the fun. There's always you're always discovering new cool ways to get stuff done.
And you'll go back to the stuff that you built months ago and be like, why did I do it that way? Why could have done it so much easier.
Happens.
Always. A question here in the chat from Trini about timestamping. So we had a bit of with the ask the app. You had a conversation flow going. How would we add timestamps?
I can show maybe.
Sure.
If we can get that going.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, all right. So all we need to do is essentially jump into the questions table, and what we can do is add a submitted time. We can add, we just make this date time. And then on the layout, we need to reconfigure that action actually. So we can jump into actions. And all we need to do, as far as I know, is just select the submitted date time as the current date time. So that will include the current date time in the question. And we can show this maybe just for display purposes. It's not going to say anything for these two, but if we ask another question, what is the wholesale price of the Etna Bianco? Now, hopefully this will work because the other two work perfectly on stream. So let's see if this works. I think it should be $99. There we go, which is correct. It's 99. So it hasn't included the dollar sign, but the price is 99, and now we've got the timestamp. So yeah, that's how you would do that.
Fantastic. Thank you for taking that curveball.
I'm happy to do it. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we are almost at time here, and I just want to wrap up with one more question. Not just about AI in general, OpenAI or AI, but for Glide in general. What pro tip do you have for new builders? It could be existing builders for building apps in Glide.
Absolutely. So I think there's two parts to this, right? The first is that it's always beneficial to join some sort of community. So Glide has a fantastic forum, and everybody's active in there, answering questions, providing solutions, and that sort of stuff. And then obviously I have to plug Low Code School. But the point is, join a community. It's a great way to interact with other people building apps, and they're going to help you out on the journey. I know in Low Code School, the focus is everybody levels up together and we all help each other. And it's the same in Glide's community. The forum is fantastic. It's really supportive, and you got some experts there. I know Bob's watching this stream. He's one of the most prolific helpers in the community. And yeah, so join a community. That's the first thing. And then second is just keep building apps. If you have an idea, try and build it. Just throw stuff at the paper, at the canvas, and you'll find some really creative ways of building apps. You'll find more efficient ways of building apps. And with that comes confidence. So if you're looking to build apps for clients and you've built personally 100 apps already, you know that you're going to be able to do it. And especially if you've got the support of a community behind you, that's the advice. So surround yourself with other gliders, other low coders, and basically just keep building.
Love it. And mentioning Bob, who I see in the chat, fielding questions. Thank you, Bob. Robert Petito does amazing tutorials here on YouTube. And as I mentioned earlier, this is part one in a 3-part series of building with Glide and OpenAI. And next week, we're going to have Bob here on Build with Glide talking about building a companion app for IT help desks. So that's going to be a really fun one. If you want to jump on that RSVP, head over to glideapps.com/events. That'll take you to our event page, and you can RSVP for next week. And then on July 13th, we're going to be back with Grumo, where we're going to do a little bit more advanced stuff with OpenAI. It's going to be a really good one. And that is it for us. Thank you so much, Marco, for joining us for this session. Grateful for you coming on at 3. Was it 3 in the morning where you are?
3:54 a.m. here.
3:54 a.m. My goodness.
I do have some support, so it's all right. We get it done here. I'm committed to Glide. Awesome.
Thank you so much. And for everybody else, if we didn't get to your questions, as Marco mentioned, head over to the community, community.glideapps.com. Tons of smart people in the forum over there. Happy to answer your questions. Yeah, we'll leave it there. Thank you, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your week.
Guys.
Cheers. Have a good one.